Greetings and welcome to the Archie Davis Center. Built in 2001, the Archie Davis Center in Winston-Salem, North Carolina is the main office of the Moravian Music Foundation and also the home of the Moravian Archives Southern Province. We share the building with a great deal of delight and joy in that our collections are closely interrelated and work together well. Here in the Archie Davis Center, there are many resources for visitors. Whether you just want to look and see what we have, whether you want to borrow something from the lending library, whether you're interested in researching a project, there are many resources here as well as on our website. Just wanted to say welcome. It's good to have you here. I'm now standing in the reading room. You saw me before just standing right outside it, but I'm standing next to a computer station where it's easy to access the online catalog of Moravian Music Foundation holdings. Now, you don't have to come here to see that catalog. You can research that from your own telephone or your own device wherever you happen to be around the world. Our entire collection is cataloged online, whether the music is housed here in Winston-Salem or housed in Bethlehem. But if you find yourself here and wanting to know where to find a particular piece of music, this is where you come. Here in the research library, there are a great many books that are of interest to people studying Moravian history, Protestant church music, American music history, and the like, including some very standard resources such as the New Grove Dictionary of Music and its German equivalent MGG. There are also resources that are of great use to people planning worship. For instance, there is a single copy of every publication in the Moravian Star Anthem series that you can come and just look at. And there are notebooks filled with the music in the Southern Province Lending Library, which we manage. Now, these notebooks live here in the reading room, and you are welcome to come and look at them and page through them. There is a piano upstairs, so if you need a chance to play through some of these pieces, just to take a closer listen, we can make it possible for you to sit upstairs and play the piano just to check the music out. We're now standing inside the 6,000 square foot vault that's in the lower level of the Archie Davis Center. Roughly 10% of that vault square footage contains materials that are in the custody of the Moravian Music Foundation. The other 90% is materials of the Moravian Archives, Southern Province. You're probably hearing the air handling system. It's a very powerful air handling system here, designed to keep the vault at a consistent temperature and humidity year-round, no matter what North Carolina's variable weather produces. The lighting is also a little different in here. There are ultraviolet light filters in all of the light fixtures to protect the manuscripts and books here from damage of ultraviolet light. You'll never get a sunburn if you're working in here. I've pulled several boxes to show you some of the treasures that are here in the vault, and I'll just start talking about a few of them. What I'm pulling out is an anthem that was written by Moravian composer Simon Peter, the older brother of Johann Friedrich Peter. This anthem was written in 1803 for the 50th anniversary of the arrival of the first Moravian settlers in North Carolina. 17th of November 1803 is the date on the anthem. Now you're seeing This is not music that you are looking at, the main piece right here in front of you. This is the cover of the anthem, but the ink has bled through over the centuries since this music was copied. Now, the other thing that you're seeing about this is a solo voice part. Voice parts nowadays, when you're a singer, you get to see everything that everyone is singing. Not so 250 years ago. All of these had to be hand copied. Nobody's going to copy 4 voice parts and a keyboard part or even the string parts so that you just can see more. So our soprano, who is not the soloist, must sit through 17 measures of rest and the soprano solo and come in on the right note. Just the same way that instrumentalists play and now. So we have all of our voice parts here, and we have string parts. Most of the Moravian anthems were written for voices with accompaniment by a chamber orchestra. This one is no exception. I said this was written for the 50th anniversary of the arrival of the first Moravian settlers. How do I know that? On the cover, the wrapper, it notes, Simon Peter, the composer, notes that the anthem was written on the daily text for 17th of November, 1803. Now, the Moravian Archives does have a complete set of daily texts going back to the first publication in the 1730s. In addition, one of the treasures that have been kept by these wonderful Moravians is in this box. The Moravians kept the order of worship, or the ode, for their most significant events. And I'm pulling out right now the ode for November 17th, 1803. They printed the ode for this occasion. That many of the odes are manuscript. This one is printed, and it says Psalm or Ode of Thanks and Joy for the Jubilee of the Moravians in Wachovia, 17th November 1803. And when we look inside this ode, we see what people sang. Here's where the worship leader sang, the congregation sang, and a little farther on in the ode, you find this anthem right here, the text of this anthem, which says it's for 2 choirs, and it says Losung des Tages, the text for the day, and this text is indeed the text for the anthem I just showed you the manuscript of. I mentioned that most of the choral music in our collections is written for sets of parts rather than a full score. There is one highly significant exception to that guideline, and that is the private collection of Moravian composer and pastor and bishop Johannes Herbst. Brother Herbst, over a 50-year period, starting from his years in Germany and concluding with his final years in America, he died here in Salem in 1812. He borrowed music from every Moravian composer he knew and made his own personal copies. The one that just happened to be on the top of this box is an anthem by Johann Friedrich Peter, written on the daily text for December 25th, 1787. This is a Christmas anthem, and Herbst borrowed music from Brother Peter and made a score for his own private library. This is beautiful copying, and this would be a marvelous collection if there were 30 or 40 pieces in the collection. There are close to 1,000 Moravian anthems in this collection, plus scores of some 40 large works by non-Moravian composers, including all of the choruses from Handel's Messiah, a Mass by Pergolesi, the Easter Cantata by Ernst Wilhelm Wolff, and a number of other large works that Brother Herbst copied for his private collection. The other music that I've showed you was music that belonged to the congregation, so when the composer left a settlement, he left the music behind, and he may have made personal copies to take with him to his next posting. Brother Herbst's collection of scores was his private collection, so it traveled with him. When he was called to Salem in the spring of 1811 from Lidditz, Pennsylvania, he brought this whole collection with him, and it was left here with his death in 1812. I also mentioned that the Moravian anthems are written for accompaniment by orchestra. So you've got to have competent orchestra players who can play these parts. They're not simplistic parts. Many of them are quite interesting. If you know players, you know they're a whole lot happier playing than doing nothing. So there's going to be a large collection of instrumental pieces that the Moravians copied or borrowed or purchased to bring along to give these instrumentalists something to do. The Moravians were also smart enough to recognize that playing music together is a whole lot safer activity than many of the other things people, and particularly young people, could get into. So like I said, they copied or purchased music by many composers, not Moravians. One of the real treasures here is a set of symphonies by non-Moravian composer Johann Christian Friedrich Bach. Yes, one of the sons of Johann Sebastian Bach. This is his symphony in D minor, copied by Johann Friedrich Peter in 1768 when Peter was a student in Germany. Now this looks a little different because it's been treated for conservation purposes. It's encapsulated in mylar, which is a non-reactive substance, a neutral substance, neither acidic nor alkaline. And it has been, so there have been some repairs made where the iron-based ink ate through the rag paper. This is the only known surviving manuscript copy of this work in the world, copied by Brother Peter in 1768. This work has been edited and published by AR Editions, and you see places where there are holes in the paper. How do you then edit and fill that in? You study the entire work. You study the work of that composer. You look at this and see that the holes in the paper go down in a line. You will see a parallel passage later in the work where the same thing happens in a different key. So you extrapolate from what you know and you fill in and you make very clear critical notes with the addition that says this part was added by the editor. So it's clear to see. So we have a number of symphonies by J.C.F. Bach and some trio sonatas that are the only known copies in the world, courtesy of Brother Peter and the Moravians' penchant for saving everything. There are several thousand works of instrumental music ranging in size from solo violin sonatas to full orchestras and oratorios. Another sort of item in the collection is this is a 19th century source. It was the custom in the 19th century for people to buy printed sheet music and bind their favorite music into a volume and put their name on the cover. Much like people nowadays create playlists on Spotify or whatever. When I was a kid, you bought sheet music and you 3-hole punched it and put it in a notebook. Then you bound it in a book to keep in your piano bench. When these volumes were originally being cataloged in the 1960s, an amazing discovery was found. In one of these books is one of 10 known surviving copies of the first printing of our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. How do you know it's a first printing? Nola said so can't be good enough. If you're a serious scholar, you're not going to trust the word of somebody who has a vested interest in it being the first. So you look at this piece and you discover there's no date anywhere. It does say it's printed and sold at Carr's Music Store, 36 Baltimore Street. So you go back to your city directories for this time period and you find out when Carr's Music Store was on Baltimore Street. That may narrow it down to within a few months or a few years, but there's still nothing to indicate this is the first printing and not the second or the third. Before I tell you why, take a quick look. The music is a little different from what we know now. What we know now begins bum ba dum bum bum bum. Well, that's not what's written here. What's written is dum bum 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 bum. Or even when the voice comes in, dum, bum, 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 bum. So it's a little different from what we know. Also, there are 4 verses of text. In between verses, there's a little musical interlude for the piano. If you're going to sing all 4 verses, you need that. Now, why do I say it's a first printing? What happened was Benjamin Carr heard this being sung around the streets of Baltimore, knew he was going to have a hit, and needed to get it in print before any other publisher did. What happens when you get in a hurry? You make a mistake. There's a typo which was corrected in the second printing. It is right here, the Star Spangled Banner. It says a periodic song. They neglected the first T in patriotic. It was corrected in the second printing. Makes me feel a little better about some of my typos. That will help somebody identify this was a first printing of Nola's article, as if there were going to be a second or third. So this is a marvelous treasure. There are 9 other copies known to exist in the world. So another type of book that we have here, also privately owned, was not printed music, it was manuscript books. These were copied and owned, most of them by students or teachers in Moravian schools. So it's often, there may be 3 or 4 copyists involved in this as the book went down from teacher to student to student to student. I pulled number 34 here just because it's a favorite of mine. There are pieces in here by a number of different composers, and it doesn't look like one of the ones I was looking for. Yes, one of the ones I was looking for just came open. This is a Carolina march that begins right here, and what we see over here are initials by AAVV. This is Amelia Adelaide von Fleck, one of the 3 very well-known and beloved von Fleck sisters who lived here in Salem in the middle of the 19th century. Amy taught at Salem Female Academy, now Salem Academy and College, for close to 60 years. Her sisters were also musicians, and the word from the day was when the von Fleck sisters came to your house for an evening bringing instruments, it was going to be a glorious evening's musical entertainment. Miss Amy, as she was known, was a short, small person with small hands. The story goes in the Salem College archives that a chamber group from Boston was coming down to play and needed a pianist, so Salem had assured them, we have a pianist. They got here and they saw this little short woman with very small hands and were not prepared to be impressed until she sat at the keyboard. Then they were quite impressed at Miss Amy's keyboard skills. Lest you think that all we have in our holdings here are boxes and boxes of music, I pulled out 3 books to share with you. They are all 3 hymnals. A very favorite of mine is the 1778 German Hymnal. This was the personal copy of someone you've heard me mention before, Brother Johannes Herbst, himself a composer and teacher and pastor. This is Brother Herbst's personal copy, which he brought here to Salem when he moved from Lidditz. Now, when you open the book, you'll see a couple of things. One is there's no music in here. That was typical practice for the 18th and 19th century hymnals in general, and specifically Moravian hymnals. The other thing is that composer or author names are not included in the printed books. That doesn't happen in Moravian hymnals until the very late 19th century. But Herbst wrote in his hymnal, right here you'll see that in the letters GRVZ. That is Graf von Zinzendorf. In other words, Herbst identifies this text as being written by Count Zinzendorf, Nicholas Ludwig von Zinzendorf. All of these that we have been able to verify through other sources, Brother Herbst's attributions are correct. Another detail in Brother Herbst's copy are little numbers, sometimes in the margins, sometimes just above the hymns. Some of the numbers are in black, some of them are in a little red ink, and there are numbers in here in pencil. Well, Daniel Cruz, former archivist, retired archivist, and I spent months scratching our head wondering what those numbers referred to. To make a very long story short, we discovered that the red numbers are a key to translations of this text in the 1789 English Moravian Hymnal. The black numbers keyed to a translation of that text in the 1809 English Moravian Hymnal. Remember that Brother Herbst was German, but by the late 18th century he was needing to prepare services that were in English as well. So he keyed back and forth. He might have thought in German and then put those numbers in to help him find translations of the hymns he wanted to use. I mentioned that there were red numbers, black numbers, and pencil numbers. We still don't know what the pencil numbers refer to. Heartbreaking. Another hymnal that is a treasure for us, this one dates back 150, 160 years earlier. This is a Czech Moravian hymnal from 1615. This is a large book. It is leather bound with metal clasps. Now, this book did not come down through an American Moravian family. It was purchased by the Moravian Music Foundation and Southern Province Archives in 2001. And for those of you who remember 2001, this book arrived via UPS, having flown out of New York on September 10th, 2001. It arrived to us on September 11th, 2001. Now, this book is a master of printing. It's a masterpiece of printing. You will notice there is music in here. There are just the melodies. Down the left-hand margin of each page is tiny print. These are scripture references that go with these hymns. There are large letters to begin each hymn and some little signs and symbols in between the verses. So this is a quite ornate printing job and a very, very beautiful book and an invaluable resource for studying the hymnody of the ancient Moravian Church in Czech. So there's a great deal of research that could be done in this book alone. There's also handwritten notes in the margins or above the hymns here. These are additional texts in this hymnal that would go with the same music that this tune would go to, that this hymn would go to. Now, the question that someone always asks, think of the question you would most like to ask. And that question is often, what's the oldest thing you have in your collection? I'm holding it. It is encased in acid-free cardboard, a box that was made just to hold this book. This is a Moravian German language hymnal from the year 1544. This is the book I would save first in a disaster. There are something like 3 or 4 copies known to exist in the world. This was purchased by the Moravian Music Foundation in the early 1960s for something like $300 or $400. Now, inside this book, it's a beautiful printing job again. This is German, and there are tunes. Some of the tunes that are in here are ones we still sing today. Again, this is in German. The Moravians printed hymnals in German, Czech, and Polish at the rate of about 8 a year for something close on 200 years. I don't know who did the coloring in here. It was like that when the Music Foundation bought it. But this, again, is probably the book I would save first in a disaster. So how can you get to come see these things? The vault is not public space. We generally don't bring casual visitors in here, so you're getting the behind-the-scenes tour. We can better accommodate all of our visitors if we know you're coming and what specifically you might want to look at. So please do yourself and us a favor. Let us know via email or telephone if you want to come and what you might want to look at, and we'll do our very best to accommodate your schedule. We love having visitors. We love sharing the stories of Moravian music. We love working with researchers. You're welcome.